Thank you for joining us for CUCSA's year-end reports. We will now hear from the Compensation Workgroup, their findings and recommendations. I'd like to introduce Workgroup Chair Kaitlyn LeGros.
Thank you, Jen. Hi, everyone. My name is Kaitlyn LeGros from UC Santa Barbara, and I am serving as the lead for CUCSA's Compensation Workgroup for 24-25. Our group consists of Amy Fujitani from Irvine, Alvin Cha from Merced, Paige Mejia from Riverside, and Mike Matthews from San Francisco. Collectively, our work group has 57 years of UC service. I'm going to hand it off to Paige to talk about our work group's focus.
Thank you, Kaitlyn. The Total Compensation Workgroup was tasked with continuing the work of the previous years that focused on the evaluation and enhancement of compensation practices impacting non-represented staff. The workgroup's mission is to ensure the university exercises fair, competitive, and transparent compensation practices that attract, retain, and motivate high-quality staff. Our work group set out to develop data-driven recommendations that align with the university's values of equity, excellence, and fiscal responsibility. We only will be highlighting the major topics in this presentation, and the rest of the information will be included in our final report. The topic of compensation is becoming increasingly important as housing, grocery, transportation, and other life costs continue to rise. According to the World Population Review, California is the third most expensive state in the country. The average annual cost of living across the state is around $65,000 a year, according to the 2024 data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. But the majority of the areas surrounding UC locations are 8 to 30% more expensive to live in than the state average. The most recent information from the Department of Housing and Community Data shows 5 UC locations with low income thresholds of $100,000 a year. Although salary at UC is tied to the cost of labor rather than the cost of living, UC compensation needs to remain competitive so we do not lose talented staff to other institutions whose pay is better equipped to keep cost of living in the areas. I'm going to hand it off to Mike.
Based on a questionnaire from the 2023-2024 CUCSA delegation, the most significant area for improvement across the UC is salary and compensation. Assuming that these areas of improvement push individuals to leave their positions, investing in staff compensation would boost staff morale and retention across the UC. In fiscal year 2023-2024, the UC separation rate was 8.3%, meaning that 10,849 staff at the UC separated from their position. A study by Gallup found that replacing existing workers costs 1/2 to 2 times the employee's annual salary when all costs, such as recruiting, interviewing, hiring, training, and reduced productivity, are considered. Given the high cost of turnover, even modestly investing to improve compensation will lead to long-term savings for UC through enhancing staff retention. Before we get into details about our working group's recommendations, we want to touch on the current UC financial situation. At the start of the 2024-2025 fiscal year, UC was in a much different position financially than where it is now. State cuts to the permanent budget, increased tariffs, natural disasters, and threats to research funding have strained the UC's budget immensely. Because of the size of the UC system, any meaningful recommendation about staff compensation involves a significant amount of financial support. We recognize that leaders are struggling to find funds to maintain current operations, so requests for additional funding are not the most realistic. While the UC faces these new budget difficulties, staff compensation struggles also persist. Staff compensation requires constant attention, and our recommendations are aimed at attracting, retaining, and motivating high-quality staff at the University of California. Turning it over to Amy.
Thanks, Mike.
This chart shows around 48,000 non-represented annualized staff salaries broken down into salary quartile by location. Since each policy-covered employee's salary scale is adjusted based on title code and UC location, salary quartile distribution is one of the better ways we can compare salary data across all locations. Although we can see some general trends with this information, like the majority of staff being in the second and third quartiles shown in red and green respectively, we also see some location outliers. For example, the Office of the President has no non-represented employees in quartile 1, whereas Santa Barbara and ANR have an abnormally large quartile 1. Santa Cruz is also an outlier, with their second quartile being much larger than in other locations. This difference is in part because of their location's non-represented staff employee equity program. This graph breaks down the same information by salary grade. Salary grade refers to a classification of job roles with similar values used to determine compensation. When examined in this way, we see clean data pointing to salaries higher in their range for higher salary grades. Most locations have the majority of policy-covered staff within the first and second quartiles of their range, shown respectively in blue and red on this chart. Since the 50th percentile is considered market value for any given salary range, this means that the vast majority of policy-covered staff at UC are paid below market value for their work. I'm going to hand it off to Kaitlyn.
Thank you, Amy. Our data poll this year also includes years of UC service as a data point. Looking at UC service by salary grade shows folks in the lower salary grades tending to have lower years of UC service, and years of UC service growing as the salary grades get higher. Though our work group was encouraged by our access to UC service credit for our data analysis, we want to emphasize that UC service credit is only an additional data point. It does not tell the full employment or compensation story for any employee, and it cannot be used independently to make causational claims. Going back to system-wide salary quartiles, we continued our research by slicing the data in different ways to look for trends and/or outliers. Here we pulled 7 popular PSS title codes and salary quartiles system-wide and compared that to the same data for specific locations. This top left chart is system-wide data, and the other 3 show data specific to Santa Barbara, Berkeley, and Irvine campuses. Santa Barbara is an example of a location paying employees relatively lower than other locations and compared to the system-wide example. As you can see in the top right chart, Santa Barbara has a disproportionate amount of employees in these title codes being paid in the first quartile of their salary range, shown in blue. These inconsistencies are further highlighted when we notice that the average years of service for these 7 titles system-wide was lower than the average years of service in these titles at Santa Barbara. Berkeley is an example of a location paying employees relatively higher than other locations and the system-wide example. As you can see in the bottom left, many more employees fall in the third quartile of their salary range, shown in green, compared to the system-wide example. Irvine is an example of a location somewhat in the middle. Some of their employees are paid similarly to system-wide examples, while others are paid relatively lower or higher. I'm going to hand it off to Alvin to talk about some of our salary recommendations.
Thanks, Kaitlyn. In reviewing salary data our work group received, we noticed employees with the same title codes were being paid differently depending on which UC campus they worked at. These inconsistencies point to a bigger issue. Without a consistent approach to equity reviews, it's hard to ensure fair pay across the system. Our work group recommends implementing a clear system-wide policy that standardizes how often equity reviews happen, how they're conducted, and how the results are shared. Giving campus leaders regular access to this information is a crucial first step in closing these gaps. But data alone is not enough. We also need action. So we're also proposing an equity pool be established at each UC location to support equity reviews and equity-driven salary increases. The 23-24 compensation work group's research indicated that although a methodology exists for determining equity, leadership might not act on equity-driven salary increase recommendations to compensate staff fairly due to budget restrictions or absence of permanent funding for equity-based salary actions. As illustrated in previous slides, compensation for non-represented staff varies significantly across UC locations. Therefore, it is crucial that all non-represented staff continue to receive consistent and equitable salary increases each year. Although since 2020, there has been a general positive trend in annual salary increases for non-represented staff, we continue to feel the financial effects from years when salary increases were not provided. We acknowledge and recognize President Drake's commitment to non-represented staff receiving competitive raises each year. We believe it is essential for incoming UC leadership to uphold and build upon the positive momentum of fair annual salary increases for non-represented staff. We also know that housing insecurity is a growing concern for many UC staff, especially in high-cost areas across California. While we absolutely need long-term solutions like building more staff housing, we also recognize how tough and costly that can be. For this reason, we met with colleagues at UC Irvine to learn more about their staff emergency housing assistance program. It's a simple but powerful idea. Staff who are at immediate risk of losing their housing can apply for up to $4,000 in emergency support. We believe this model can be expanded system-wide. Even an allocation of $100,000 per campus would be enough to launch the program and start making an impact. While we continue to advocate for broader long-term housing improvements, this is something that we can do now, something that's relatively easy to implement and could provide real relief to staff facing housing crisis. Now to Amy.
Thanks, Alvin. Dependent tuition remission is another topic our work group wants to remain vigilant about. Many major universities in the country offer some sort of tuition remission for dependents of their staff. With rising costs of education, having a dependent tuition remission program for UC staff could not only make us a more competitive employer, but also help us retain talented staff. We met with our colleague to discuss the progress made on this topic last year, and he shared what this program could look like logistically. For the dependents of each qualified staff member, UC would cover 50 to 75% of undergraduate in-state tuition and fees for up to 16 quarters or 8 semesters. Although a tuition remission program like this would not necessarily be the most competitive program in overall value, it does provide a sizable incentive for staff with dependents to continue working for the UC. We want to keep the conversation about dependent tuition going, but there is still a lot of research that needs to be dedicated to this topic before major changes are implemented. And now I'm going to hand it off to Kaitlyn to discuss our recommendations.
Thank you, Amy. Supporting fair and equitable non-represented staff compensation has always been central to CUCSA's advocacy work. Our work group aimed to research existing inequities within non-represented staff compensation and identify potential compensation improvements to contribute to the UC becoming an employer of choice. There are over 50,000 non-represented staff across the UC system supporting the mission of the university in these trying times, and our recommendations are aimed at attracting, retaining, and motivating those high-quality staff at the University of California. For more information, be sure to see the full workgroup report that is linked in the video description. We would love to discuss our recommendations with you at the CUCSA Town Hall on Tuesday, July 8th at 11 a.m. Full details are available on our website at cucsa.ucla.edu. Or you are welcome to email any questions about our recommendations to me at the email included in the description.